Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. Welcome back to Ranking the Stephen King Decades, and this is episode 10, I believe, if I'm doing my math correctly. And for this episode, it's basically a bonus episode where I rank all of the 2020 Stephen King books. And there's only 5, so this is going to be a very short, very brief video. I really only really enjoy 3 of these books. 2 of these books aren't that great. And yeah, well, you know what? Let's just get into it. Let's get into it, man. Let's get into it. All right, so for number 5, this is easily my least favorite from the 2020s. I actually read it in October for the Stephen King Readathon because it was super short. And that would be Gwendy's Final Task, which I do not own physically, but I listened to on audio. This book was not very good. I think I gave it either 2 or 2.5 stars. Man, books 2 and 3 of Gwendy's whatever just were not good, which is a shame because the first book, Gwendy's Button Box, I actually really enjoy. And if this would have been a standalone, I think it would have stood the test of time a bit more. But now knowing where the series goes with book 2, Magic Feather, which was just garbage, I really did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars. The only reason I gave it 2 stars was because it was so short. If it was longer, it probably would have been less. But book 1 was so good. Book 2 was garbage. Book 3 was slightly better than book 2. Because at least with book 3, stuff happened, right? Whereas book 2, essentially nothing happens. There's so many, one-page chapters in this book that literally did nothing to the story. But I'm here to talk about book 3, right? Gwendy's Final Task. It was very meh. The definition of meh. And it really bugs me too, because if books 2 and 3 didn't exist, this would probably still be a 4.5, 5-star read. But knowing where the series goes from here, it brings it down, which is really a bummer. And, book 3, Final Task, obviously I don't want to spoil it, but it's, Gwendy is much older and she's dealing with some early onset Alzheimer's or dementia or whichever. And it starts with her going into space, which is just ridiculous. This whole, book 2 and book 3 are just ridiculous. I really didn't like it. That's what I'm trying to say. I didn't love it. I think I settled on 2 or 2.5 stars. It's really not that good. It's definitely the worst King has written in the 2020s. So that's the reason why it's number 5 on the list. And for number 4 on the list, it's his most recent book. I was pretty disappointed with it. Not a terrible book by any means, but let's get into it. And that would be Fairy Tale for number 4 for the 2020s. And of course, I do have a dedicated book review for this already. And I go over my thoughts in very good detail. I loved the first couple hundred pages of this book. Essentially, you just develop this relationship between this young boy and this older man, and it's just so good. It's classic Stephen King. It reminds me of stuff, like Hearts in Atlantis or Apt Pupil, right? Where you just take a young character and an old character and their clashing dynamic. It's really good. And then when you actually get to the Portal Fantasy stuff, it just dips in quality, and it's just kind of boring for a lot of it. And the side characters just don't do it for me at all. And the ending was not really great. Yeah, I love the first couple hundred pages of this book. Maybe when I go back to reread it, I'll just read those first couple hundred pages and that's it. But overall, this book was fairly disappointing. I got very hyped for this book and it let me down a little bit. I did settle on 3 stars. Not a terrible book by any means. It's certainly better than Gwendy's Final Task, but it's definitely not the best King has to offer, especially not in the 2020s. So for all of those reasons, Fairy Tale comes in at number 4 for the 2020s. And for my number 3 and number 2 ranking, it's kind of a toss-up because they're both about a 4.5-star read for me. And then my number 1 spot is a 5-star read. But for number 3 and 2, it's kind of a toss-up between which one I like more. For right now, I'm going to go with number 3 as Billy Summers. This book came out last year, I believe, right? I think. It's hard to keep track. But yeah, this book was very good. Not perfect. There's some stuff that I'm not like a huge fan of, especially like the middle. The pacing is a little wonky. But overall, this book is amazing. And I loved the character of Billy Summers. He's probably going to go down as a very underrated Stephen King protagonist. Very interesting. And I loved Stephen King utilizing him basically as a writer character. Because if you don't know, Billy Summers, he's an assassin for hire. And his cover story is that he kind of moves into this house like months before the actual assassination happens. And his cover story is that he's an author. And basically what you get is like him going over his life story, just writing it. And I thought that was very clever. And then it's kind of one of those Stephen King stories where like halfway through the book, it takes a turn and it goes in a different direction that you would have never seen coming from like the premise of like the back of the story and like the premise of it. It's very good. I don't want to spoil for what happens, like what it switches to, but I thought it was very well done and very thrilling and just had a lot of great moments. Overall, definitely one of the better, newer Stephen King books. And for me, it comes at number 3 on the list. And for number 2 on the list, like I said, this is a toss-up. They're both 4.5 stars. I think this comes down to recency bias because I actually just reread this yesterday. So, you know, for number 2 for right now, I'm going to have to go with Later. And this also came out last year. 2 banger Stephen King novels came out in 2021. Both really good. I think the first time I read this, when I did my book review for this was one of the very first book reviews I ever did. I think I gave it 5 stars, but there is like a couple things that I'm not a huge fan of. So it did get bumped down to 4.5 stars. Not perfect, but still amazing. 4.5 stars. It's essentially about a kid who can see dead people. And there's definitely obviously comparisons for The Sixth Sense. Like the idea isn't wholly original, but Stephen King definitely makes it his. He takes that idea and makes it his own. Where essentially you get this little boy who can see dead people, but the interesting twist is that when he talks to these dead people, they have to tell the truth every time. Like if you ask them a question, they have to tell you the truth. And so the adults in his life kind of use him for their own ways, nefarious or good. And it's interesting to see what King does with that. And I don't want to spoil it for what happens because it is a very short, tightly paced book, especially for Stephen King. And a lot of stuff happens and it's awesome. I think it's one of his best. And yeah, I love it for the most part. And it does connect back to another previous Stephen King book. I won't spoil it for what it is, but if you've read it, you know what it is. And yeah, for all those reasons and probably more that I'm forgetting, Later comes out at number 2 on the list, which means that there is one more Stephen King book in the 2020s. That is my favorite, one of my all-time favorite Stephen King books in general, and it comes in at number 1. But what is it? Coming in at number 1 for the 2020s Stephen King books, that would obviously have to be If It Bleeds, which I think when I did my overall ranking for all of Stephen King books, I put this at the number 4 spot. And that just shows you how much I love it. It's in my top 5. And it also goes to show you that I love Stephen King novellas. Like, he is at his best writing Stephen King novellas, and all of the novellas in here are 5 stars. They're super good, and they're all very unique and different in their own ways. Like, every novella in here is a banger. You've got Mr. Harrigan's Phone, which I believe just got made into a Netflix movie, so I need to go watch that. Yet another great example of Stephen King writing a younger character mixed with an older character in their dynamic. Really good. And then you've got Life of Chuck, which is probably my second favorite Stephen King novella of all time. It's told backwards, and it's such a unique storytelling device, and it's so good. If you haven't read it, go read it. And then you have If It Bleeds, which is probably my least favorite of the 4 novellas that are in here. It connects back to another character from a lot of Stephen King's other books. And even though I'm not a huge fan of that character, this novella is so good that it elevates her character and it makes me like that character even more. And then you've got the last novella in here, which is Rat, which is just a classic Stephen King horror novella. It's so good. I believe I put it in my top 5. It's so well done. And it's another novella about a writer, character, and author, which Stephen King just does very brilliantly. And yeah, I love this novella collection. I love Stephen King novellas overall. Easy 5 stars and easily my favorite book from the 2020s from Stephen King. All right, so those are my ranked books for the 2020s from Stephen King. Probably should have said that better, but oh well. So yeah, only 5 from the 2020s so far. Obviously, you know, way down the road, what am I even saying? Way down the road in like 2030, I will go back and rank all of the books that he released in all of the 2020s, and that'll be fun. It'll especially be fun to see like if these books do stand the test of time or if I change my opinion on any of them. That would be fun. But for right now, there's only 5, and If It Bleeds is my favorite. Gwendy's Final Task is easily my least favorite. But I want to know what you guys think. What's your favorite and least favorite books that Stephen King wrote in the 2020s? Leave all of your comments down in the comments below. And stay tuned eventually for when I re-rank all of the Stephen King decades, like which Stephen King decade is my favorite and which Stephen King decade is my least favorite. I did this video in the past, but I've been rereading Stephen King this year, so I might have to rethink some things, and plus it'll probably just be a better quality video overall, so I will eventually do that. Maybe next week, or maybe I'll have another Stephen King book review. I don't know, but eventually look for that down the road, as well as me eventually re-ranking all of Stephen King's book in one 15 to 20 minute video. I will eventually do that. No promises if it'll actually come out in October. It might be early November, but look forward to that anyway. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you guys liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, Bookish Drummer, and if you want to go support me on Patreon, you can go do that. And if you want to buy me a book, I have my Amazon wish list, links down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a fantastic day.